Ethan Carter was living his life as a man without financial worries in a quiet, calm neighborhood. However, his home was empty, and the rooms were cold. His wife, Laura, and their 2 children had vanished suddenly. This was not the first time. Laura had left before, taking the children with her, but Ethan always forgave her. Now, however, the situation was different. Laura had left no note or any sign of where she had gone. When reviewing the surveillance footage, it was seen that they left the house abruptly in the middle of the night. There was no trace of her car. Her phone was unreachable. The police, FBI, and television networks had been activated, but no clues were found. Ethan had gone to the police station multiple times and had been questioned for hours. Detectives discussed Laura's childhood traumas, mentioning how her mother had abandoned her multiple times, suggesting that she might be mentally unstable. However, Ethan disregarded these explanations. All he wanted was to find his children. Days later, a significant event occurred on national television. Laura suddenly appeared and connected live. She looked exhausted, worn out, and frightened. "Didn't run away. I was kidnapped," Laura exclaimed. There was a moment of silence in the studio. All viewers and detectives held their breaths. "They took me. But they took my children. I don't know what happened. We need to find them." Ethan froze in front of the television. Where were the children? Who had taken them? Was Laura really kidnapped, or was this a new game? The FBI immediately took action. This was now not just a report of missing persons, but a national case. Ethan was now sure of one thing. This time, he would not stop. Years ago, Ethan and Laura had shared a great love. They met during their university years and built dreams together. While Ethan was rising in the financial world, Laura pursued her passion for art. They were deeply in love and married quickly, welcoming their first child into the world. At that time, Laura was living her happiest days. But the shadows of the past always followed her. Laura's childhood traumas and her mother's issues weighed heavily on her, sometimes crashing down like a nightmare. Despite Ethan's efforts to support her, there was a hard-to-describe void within Laura. At this time, someone from Laura's past resurfaced. Her ex-boyfriend, Daniel. Daniel was a dangerous man. He had brought chaos into Laura's life years ago and led her down the wrong path. Now he had returned, reminding her of sweet memories from the past and starting to confuse her mind. Daniel was not just an ex-lover. He was known to be involved in dark dealings and made money through illegal means. Initially, Laura tried to stay away from him, but Daniel did not give up. He tried every way possible to re-establish contact with her. One day, whether she wanted it or not, Laura met him in a cafe. Daniel talked about their happy times and offered her bad substances. Laura initially refused, but the storm in her mind grew stronger. The traumas she experienced, the monotony of her marriage, and her inner unrest slowly pulled her into this dead end. Using her indecision, Daniel pushed further. "This will do you good, Laura. You'll forget all your troubles," he said. At that moment, Laura's mind became a battlefield. That day, she made perhaps the biggest mistake of her life. Ethan began to notice changes in Laura at home. She was sleepless at night, distracted, and occasionally disappeared for hours. Yet he hadn't yet grasped the seriousness of the situation. Then, one night, Laura disappeared with the children. Ethan thought this was just another escape like before, but in reality, the situation ran much deeper. Now, as the FBI and police got involved, Ethan was preparing to face a horrifying truth. Laura hadn't just left. Perhaps she had been kidnapped. Perhaps she had been sold. Laura was changing due to her substance use. She was becoming increasingly impatient, aggressive, and paranoid. Worst of all, she was beginning to mistreat their children. What had started as minor arguments escalated into shouting and even physical violence over time. Ethan was devastated when he learned what was happening to his children. He had always tried to support Laura, knowing her past and forgiving her. But now, the children were being harmed and he couldn't stop it. The pain he felt as a father gnawed at him. He had failed to protect them. The guilt within him merged with his past mistakes, forming a heavy burden. On one hand, he was losing his wife, and on the other, he was watching his children slip away. He had been taught that fathers should always be strong, but now he felt completely helpless. If he didn't find them, he might never see them again. The very thought took his breath away. Meanwhile, Laura was also fighting an internal battle. She had fallen into Daniel's trap. Now she was completely under his control, and her biggest regret was not going to the police. If you enjoyed our story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Let's make this journey even more enjoyable together. As she realized that her choices cost her children, her internal anxieties grew, and her regrets consumed her. And now, time was running out. Isabella Moreau was a high-ranking executive at a major pharmaceutical company based in France. Traveling. For business, she was passing time at an airport restaurant in America when she saw a poster about Ethan's missing children on the wall. A father was searching for his lost children. The image of the flyer and the despair in Ethan's eyes lodged in Isabella's mind. Despite trying to focus on her work, she couldn't shake off the flyer from her thoughts. The innocent faces of the children and the hopelessness in their fathers' eyes reminded her of previous missing person cases she had witnessed. A question formed in her mind. If I could really do something, would it be right to ignore this? Isabella couldn't forget the despair on Ethan's face and the innocent smiles of the children in the poster. At first, she thought it was just a missing persons case. However, as days went by, she distanced herself from this thought. A voice inside her told her that the situation was much bigger and more dangerous. The kidnapping cases she had witnessed in the past, the news of human trafficking, all pointed to this case being a tragedy far beyond that of a simple missing persons report. The image of the flyer would not leave her mind, and the unsettling feeling within her grew stronger each day. Days later, she traveled to a country in East Asia for work. After finishing a business meeting in the afternoon, she took a walk through a historic market. As she walked through the narrow streets, children begging on one corner caught her attention. The local guide accompanying her noticed her curious gaze, paused and whispered, "Most of these children have been kidnapped. Their families don't even know where they are. They fall into the hands of human trafficking gangs. First, they're made to beg, then they're forced into other things." The guide's words chilled Isabella to the bone. Her heart tightened, and her breath became shallow. As she scanned the children with her eyes, she suddenly saw two small figures in tattered clothes in the corner, staring at a few coins thrown at their feet. Their little hands were shaking. Isabella couldn't believe her eyes. She instinctively reached for her phone. She tried to approach to take pictures and examine them more closely, but a feeling of dread washed over her. A man, watching the children, scanned the area carefully. Before Isabella could reach them, the man quickly began to pull the children away. In that moment, Isabella realized this was not just a simple story of poverty. The children were part of something much bigger and more horrifying. The two children, resembling those in the posters, sat shivering in dirty clothes. One tightly clung to the other, anxiously gazing around. Their small, worn hands looked as if they were frozen from the cold. Isabella's head spun. Her heart began to race. She paused for a moment to grasp whether what she was seeing was real. She quickly took her phone out and snapped a picture of the children. However, as she stepped closer to examine them, one of the children raised its head in fear. In that instant, Isabella realized these children were not just lost. They were also trapped in a state of terror. Yet, she knew she couldn't stay there much longer. She noticed suspicious movements from a scruffy-looking man with a stern expression who was guiding them. The man frequently checked on the children, not allowing them to stray too far. He talked on his cell phone often and cast suspicious glances around him. An uneasy feeling filled Isabella. The children were not just begging. It was as if that man was controlling their movements, calculating every step they took. She felt a sense of bargaining was taking place, but she didn't know with whom or why. Her instincts told her there was something much darker hidden here. She quickly took a trembling picture and took a deep breath as she reached out to Ethan. She felt her heart racing. What if she was wrong? What if it was real and it was already too late? But a voice inside her told her this was a chance. Squinting her eyes, she looked at the photo again and resolutely sent her message. Mr. Carter, I've never met you before, but I'm almost certain I've seen your children. I'm watching them right now, and they seem to be under someone's supervision. You must act immediately. As soon as Ethan received the message, he sprang into action. He immediately contacted the FBI, and the authorities began to verify the information provided by Isabella. At that moment, Isabella continued monitoring the children from a distance without losing sight of them. The man hurriedly loaded the children into a vehicle while keeping an eye around him. Isabella watched, holding her breath. After a while, the man who was taking the children met with a few people in a secluded back street. She cautiously moved, closer to hear their conversation, trying not to draw attention. The discussions grew intense. They were bargaining. An indescribable fear welled up inside Isabella. The children were part of a dark deal, and they had reached a point of no return. Ethan, speaking with the FBI agents, was left in shock at what he heard. The children were not just begging on the streets. A trafficking gang was exploiting them for some time before selling them into the sex trade. Ethan's head spun. He felt nausea rise up within him. Anger and helplessness surged like a wave. Isabella covered her mouth with trembling hands. Her eyes filled with tears. For her, this was no longer a matter of news or testimony. Her heart tightened as she thought about what the children must be experiencing at that very moment. However, things were about to get even more horrifying. One of the key figures in these negotiations was a familiar face. Daniel, the man from Laura's past who had descended like a nightmare on their lives. Ethan's eyes darkened, his fists clenched. Now he had one single purpose: to save his children at any cost. Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. His wife's ex-boyfriend had turned their children's lives into objects for bargaining. His feelings of anger and helplessness began to blur together, causing his hands to tremble. The fire in his heart was fueled by this dreadful truth. He could no longer wait. He could no longer hesitate. His eyes darkened, fists clenched. He now had one mission only: to rescue his children and pull them out of this nightmare, no matter the cost. Isabella panicked when she saw the children being loaded into a vehicle and taken away. Immediately, with trembling hands, she reached out to Ethan and detailed what she had witnessed. The pounding of her heart echoed in her ears. She tried to memorize the vehicle's license plate, but the muddy surface made it hard to see clearly. All she knew was that the children were disappearing. Time was running out. This was touching a much larger gang, and it was uncertain where the children would be taken next. Isabella had to do everything in her power. She tried to dive into back alleys to follow the vehicle, but when she lost it, a deep sense of helplessness engulfed her. This crime was much bigger and more organized than she had thought. Isabella needed to reach out to the authorities without further delay and plan the next move. For Ethan, there was no turning back. He would do anything to save his children. Ethan learned during his discussion with the FBI that there was a global alliance dealing with cases of abduction and trafficking. Known as the Anti-Human Trafficking and Prostitution Coalition, AHTPC, this group worked through covert operations to combat child trafficking and slavery. They collaborated with the FBI and Interpol but operated independently. Have they solved such cases before? Can we get help from them? Ethan asked. The FBI agent replied, AHTPC works very discreetly, but they have uncovered the largest human trafficking operations. We need to make direct contact to collaborate, but we are in a race against time. These words etched themselves into Ethan's mind. He needed help not just from the FBI but also from this international alliance. Meanwhile, Isabella was detailing what she had witnessed to the FBI agents and Isabella. The men were moving very methodically. They held the children at one point and then loaded them into a black-windowed car. They were talking about something, but I couldn't hear exactly what they said. However, I noticed one of them seemed very angry. It felt like something had gone wrong. FBI agent, can you provide us with more specifics? Which direction did the vehicle head? How many people were there? Isabella closed her eyes, trying to visualize everything in her mind. Isabella. There were two men. One was on the phone, looking extremely tense. The vehicle headed north. I caught a glimpse of part of the license plate, but not all of it. I think they were going to hand the children off to someone else. This information was a critical lead for the FBI. Ethan clenched his teeth. A race against time had begun, and this time an international coalition might also be involved. Ethan, do whatever it takes. Get in touch with the IKFMB. We need to take those children back. At the IKFMB's operations center, a man appeared on screen to speak with Ethan and the FBI. This man was the coalition's chief, Leonard Leo Mercer. He had piercing eyes that carried the deep lines of years lived and a simmering underlying anger and pain. Everyone knew he was calm and resolute, but inside, this operation was also personal for him. Leo was a former Special Forces officer. Years ago, his daughter was kidnapped, and after weeks of desperate searching, her small body was found by a river. That moment forever changed Leo's life. Instead of becoming lost in grief and anger, he devoted himself to this fight. Now every operation meant not just saving lost children, but also easing his own conscience. He had stepped onto a path of no return. He had nothing left to lose because he had already lost his most precious treasure. Leo broke the silence on the screen. Leo, these men leave no trace. If you want to get your children back, we need to act quickly and decisively. We're ready. But do you understand what that means? This is not a street gang. It's a globally organized criminal network. At the end of this road lies a dark, corrupt world that doesn't value human life. Once you step in here, there's no turning back. Are you truly ready to enter this war? Without hesitation, Ethan replied. Ethan, I'll do anything to save my children. They are the meaning of my life. I can't imagine a world without them. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Leo nodded. Leo, then let's begin. A two-stage plan was formulated for the operation, based on the information provided by Isabella. The first target was the last location where the children were seen. The FBI, in collaboration with local law enforcement, began to sweep the area while the IKFMB's Special Operations Team planned to reach the gang leaders. The team, collecting information from local surveillance cameras, informants, and field agents, believed they could locate the secret warehouse where the children were being held. At this point, a swift and coordinated strike would be essential. Leo and his team deployed to the field. They had one chance: to rescue the children unharmed and capture the gang's main leader. The team completed their preparations throughout the night. In the early hours of the morning, identified smugglers were monitored. The vehicle carrying the children was detected heading toward a port to exit the country. As the vehicle approached the customs area undetected, the gang leaders met in a dark corner of the port. They were negotiating, discussing how much the children would fetch and finalizing the plans for the delivery's security. Leo observed, from a distance with binoculars. Every word he heard ignited deep anger within him. It was time. He brought one hand to his radio and quietly issued orders. Leo, we're moving in. All teams, take your positions, protect the children, and capture the leaders alive. Leo, we're on the move. In the midnight raid that began, IKFMB agents and FBI teams silently infiltrated the port. The first objective was to stop the vehicle carrying the children. Agents quickly sprang into action. The vehicle was followed and cornered in a dead-end alley. The armed men were thrown into panic, their eyes filled with fear and shock. Their escape routes were blocked. Leo commanded over the radio, "Be careful. The children must not be harmed." Just then, one of the armed men opened fire. A gunfight ensued. Leo and his team moved with precision, eliminating the attackers one by one. Leo was like a hunter with years of experience. Using tactical advantage, he swiftly took down the most dangerous man, When he opened the vehicle's door, he saw the terrified children clinging to each other. "It's okay. You're safe now," he said, his voice unexpectedly filled with compassion. "We're going to get you out of here. Leo, get the children to a safe zone. Now let's find out who else is here." At that moment, Daniel, one of the most wanted names among the traffickers, was trying to escape. But Leo and Ethan would not let him go. As Daniel attempted to hide in a warehouse, Ethan cornered him. He was panting, his eyes darting nervously from side to side. "Daniel, Ethan, think a bit. If you catch me, you won't be able to take down the whole network. There are bigger players out there. I'm your only chance." Ethan narrowed his eyes, his anger at its peak. But Leo didn't take Daniel's flailing seriously. He calmly withdrew his weapon and spoke steadily. "Leo, do you know that every man who lies to save his own skin says the same thing, Daniel? But today you don't have a chance." Daniel briefly tried to flee, but Leo acted quickly and brought him down to the ground. Within seconds, FBI agents rushed in and handcuffed Daniel. He had nowhere left to run. Daniel smiled. "Daniel, do you really have the courage to do this, Ethan? Remember, your wife once resisted but ultimately gave up." Ethan's fists tightened. His eyes blazed with fury. But Leo stepped forward, watching Daniel coolly. "Leo, there's no bargaining with these men. They're merely creatures hiding in the shadows, not valuing human life. We've saved the children, and there's no escape for you now, Daniel. The game is over. The children were safe. The gang had been completely dismantled, bringing an end to the fear and suffering that had persisted for years. And an individual who had sold children for years would finally stand before justice. This was not just a personal victory, but a step of hope for the entire world. When Ethan embraced his children, all the emotions he had kept inside burst forth. The fear, anger, despair, and guilt he had harbored for days flowed down his cheeks, in tears. He inhaled their scent, feeling the rhythm of their hearts. Their tiny arms clung tightly around his neck as if they never wanted to let go. "I will never let you go," he whispered with a trembling voice. "No one will ever harm you again." One of the children sobbed and asked, "Daddy, can we go home now?" In that moment, Ethan's heart ached even more. He didn't know exactly what they had been through, but he would do whatever it took to ensure they escaped this nightmare. Suddenly, all the noise around him fell silent. He could only hear his children's breath and their heartbeats. In that moment, he felt for the first time in years that he was truly alive. Leo, watching them from a distance, took a deep breath. In place of a lost battle, there was a hard-won hope, and he would continue to fight this battle for the rest of his life. If you enjoyed our story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Let's make this journey even more enjoyable together.